Welcome to This Week in Heresy, episode 67. What's so funny about being pagan? With our guest via Skype, Angus McMahan. Hey Angus, welcome to This Week in Heresy.
Hey, glad to be here.
Excellent. So for the sake of our audience, can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are and what you do?
How much time have you got? My name is Angus McMahan. I just turned 50 this year, so I'm a half century old, which really only means that every time I do a triathlon, my results look better because I'm in a new demographic now. So there's a few of us old silverbacks out there doing the run. So my time stay the same, but my results keep getting better as I get older. So that's your aging benefit right there. What do? I do all kinds of things. I'm a tarot reader. I help out newbies and beginners. I'm the vice president of a nonprofit called Community Seed that puts on about 35 events every year. So we're one of the more active groups out there. And just one of a few in my small little town of Santa Cruz where we have 4 different witchy stores in our little small town. By comparison, San Jose, which has 8 million people in the basin, has like 2 stores.
Right.
So little tiny Santa Cruz has 4. So
Right.
So I do what needs to be done. That means making flyers. If that means writing rituals, that means stacking chairs. I'm there for you.
Awesome. So you do presentations at Pagan, and I've seen them in the program. Unfortunately, I have not been able to make them.
Aha, you're the one.
Yeah. But you do comedy. So what led you to that, and what kind of comedy did you do?
What led me to do presentations at PantheaCon was one of those, some of the best things you can learn in life are don't let this happen to you. So I attended a Monday morning workshop, and I'm not going to say who or with what, but it was god awful, or God's awful for polytheists out there. I'm not going to give any details. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but a friend of mine, we saw it together, and we walked out going, hey, we could do a better job than that. And so I got to thinking over the course of next year, like, okay, if I was going to do a presentation, what would I do? And since I'm a storyteller, I thought, okay, well, I'll just tell stories. So I just grabbed a few of my favorite blog posts and strung them together with some, literary connective tissue, and boom, Pagan Humor 1 was there. And it got a really good response. And the next year they put me in a bigger room. And I sort of redid 1, and it became 2, sort of like a remix version, because I knew much more about what I was doing by that point. And that one went really well. And then they put me in a bigger room. And then quickly I ran out of pagan humor material. Because I'm sort of a general storyteller, so I do all kinds of things. So starting with number 3, I just started telling stories about myself, sometimes with a theme and sometimes not. So this is number 8 upcoming, and they've gotten very, very far away from the pagan sphere, but no one's complained or said anything, and people keep showing up. So I'm going to keep doing it.
That's all good. What led you into storytelling?
I've always been a really creative person. I've been a musician. I've been a sculptor. I need to make things, and I need my best forte, and it's turned out, has been words. Or words are my buddies. So I started writing very early, got into short stories, wrote lyrics, thousands of lines of poetry that no one will ever hear. A novel when I was 19 that is locked away in a trunk that no one will ever see. And then quickly, the only thing I didn't major in college in English, and I took so many classes, they stopped giving me credit for them after a while. OU again. The only thing I didn't take in college in the English department was journalism. So, of course, I got into nonfiction writing and reporting from there. And I just really I got into, truth is stranger than fiction. I'll just tell you things that are actually happening out there, mostly things that have happened to me. So writing was great. And then once the blogosphere opened up, I was a natural for that. So Angus Land was born with a hyphen in there, because if you just go to Angus Land without the hyphen, they want to sell you cattle. So you got to put the little hyphen between Angus and Land there, or you just get pictures of cows. But then coupled with I'm not a wallflower, I'm not shy, and people tell me I have a good voice. So I started doing open mics and telling little stories there, and moved up to just whatever I could get. Coupled with tarot reading, which is also a performance art of type. Mm-hmm. And then I just became kind of a performer, but I'm not a stand-up comedian, because I find stand-up comedians to be very harsh and almost entirely negative. Mm-hmm. Not saying negative isn't funny. There's a spot for that. So I shy away from that moniker. And I like storyteller better, because then it's more surprising if it's very funny. People like to hear stories, but if they're entertaining stories, hey, even better. So all that kind of came together. It's okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, and here's the perfect venue to do all of these things in. So that's where all that came from.
Awesome. What is it, do you think, about humor that helps people? What is it about what you do and how you do it that brings people in, I suppose?
That's a really good question. And I've actually thought a lot about this, about, what are the mechanics of such things, and, why does this work so well? And how does it really touch people? And what really got me to studying this as much as you can, is I read this little factoid that, years ago, or just a couple years ago, when I was growing up, the most trusted man in America, because growing up in the 70s, of course, it had to be a man. It was just never a trusted man, was always Walter Cronkite. Mm-hmm. Or Walter Cronkite, this voice that we grew up with. And he was a very trustworthy guy. And I sort of lost track of that. And then I heard that, now the most trusted man in America was Jon Stewart of The Daily Show. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, so I love the guy, I like him as much as my wife wants to do him, but I found it very strange that an actual, comedian would be that trusted. And I started taking the job a little more seriously at that point. Mm-hmm. And so what I love about humor and writing it is the surprise. That's what makes it funny. If people know, the punchline or where you're going with this, they may be interested, but they're not going to be riveted by it. They're sort of going along for the ride. I've seen a movie for the second time. You can enjoy it along the way, but the first time, it's more special because it's surprising. So, as a word jockey, it is very satisfying for me to approach a setting, a situation, or tell this little bit, and then have it twist at the end. And that twist is important not only because it creates the humor, because it's coming from something you didn't recognize. That's what a joke is all about, is something unexpected. But it moves all of the synapses to a different part of the brain, because suddenly you're trying to connect these things that were not connected before. And it is when we use both sides of our brain and the lovely connective tissue between them, that's when we really make connections. That's when we make breakthroughs. Some of my all-time favorite people are people who were really, not geniuses, but really adept at two or more different pastimes. And then they found a third road that combined the two things together. I really love people like that, who innovated some way or invented something like that. So this is the way I can do those kind of things, by taking you on a little journey and then having you arrive at a destination you hadn't expected to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, speaking of like John, in that style of Jon Stewart, especially, I think people underestimate how good humor can really make you think outside of your own self for a bit, and then teach you about things that you maybe haven't known about, or didn't know about, or didn't want to learn even.
Yes.
But because of humor, you're like, oh, okay, well, I think I can see outside of myself now,
Right. My videographer, Mark, patient man, who has been with me all this time, and who's like done things like the original audio has failed, so he'll like physically sync up the words with like my iPod recording, to make sure, he's gone above and beyond in so many ways. Club Max has like 2 light bulbs in it.
Yeah.
And somehow he found a way, that people could see me and I could see my script, things like that. He doesn't think what I do is comedic. He thinks it's political.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that viewpoint. And, he's always saying, wow, you really hit some good points there. You made people think about things, and you brought up these topics that, nobody likes to talk about. And I guess I consciously do that, but it's sort of buried in the midst of all these flowery words and fun little, references and, dick jokes and all the rest of it in there. But I guess, almost beside myself, I actually do get some points across now and then. So, okay, I'll go with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes you can get away with things in humor and in storytelling that you don't necessarily get away with in general conversation. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Especially when you're just blogging, because there's no immediate feedback.
Mm-hmm.
You can get away with all kinds of things, and if you lose a bunch of your followers, then okay, maybe you went a little too far. But
right.
But what I love about the performing aspect of it is it's the immediate gratification, or you have people there, and the immediate feedback that you get. You can tell the audience, you can feel it. Because at Club Max, I couldn't see them.
Right.
Because there's no, it's a nightclub, so there's no lights on the audience. I could see 4 people around the edge of the dance floor because their chairs were close enough. And thankfully, none of them were sleeping. So I figured I kind of, I was going good to the crowd because those 4 people seemed to be interested, and they stayed for the whole thing. But now, since Club Max has become Club Min now or something, and it's imploded, we're back in the regular rooms with actual light. Mark will be so happy that he can actually film me and film the folks, even though nobody ever sees this.
Mm-hmm.
Because your performance is technically a part of the convention, which is part of Ancient Ways or something. So I have these theater quality DVDs of all the shows that I can never show anybody. So it was always just for me and my mom.
I was also thinking while we were talking is, how, so here's the first part is, do you think we need more pagan humor? Because like there are some times where I'm like, man, you are taking yourself way too seriously.
As if I could give an injection to everybody in the general populace, yeah. But I think compared with other faiths or movements or however we're calling it these days, I think pagans have a way better sense of humor than other groups, because we make it up as we go along. It's not a revealed religion. There's no sacred text.
Mm-hmm.
It's the very addition of a cult. A word we don't use that often, is you go find your own truths.
Right.
And then it becomes very personal. And that can lead to a lot of the friction we have because, hey, it works and it works for me, so it's right.
Mm-hmm.
Capital R, right. Yeah. But I think also because it's because we do find our own truths and we do share them with each other, and we don't say that enough or comment enough on that, of all the positives of getting together and just, doing what we do. With the group that I hang out with, a lot of times when we're together, we're making something, gigantic props for the next ritual, or, cleaning out a shed or something like that. Or even the times before a ritual, we'll have, 4 or 6 hours of setup time. That's my favorite part. Sometimes I like that even better than the ritual, because it's just me and the peeps hanging out. And Community Seed, this group, it's not a tradition. It's not a particular faith. It's just a group of people to come. And so we have all these different viewpoints that come in. And that is, I think, one of our biggest strengths, is that it is so diverse. And when you have that kind of diversity and you have that love of ideas and you have that respect for each other, then that is the perfect breeding ground for humor. So that's when we laugh the most, is when we have hammers in our hands and we're, painting scenery or something like that. Love those times.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know, and even in our own coven, the times where things are happening and, we don't expect things to happen and it just becomes extremely silly, or, we're joking around about, I don't know, somebody's sarong being off or something, it's the times, it seems to me that like some of the more magical times have been when we would just rolling on the floor laughing because it's just so absurd.
Yeah. There's this great phenomenon that nobody ever really talks about. Weddings are boring. And that's up there with saying, like, I don't enjoy being a parent. Things you just never ever say in the general populace. It's like, I think they're boring because they're very scripted and they're done by people who don't do ritual for the most part. And so a wedding is one of the few big rituals that your general populace will actually partake in. And because you don't have that much experience, it's got to be perfect. And perfect means there's no creativity in it. So you become like the standard script kind of thing. But what happens at every wedding is, you're there, you're in a very uncomfortable outfit, probably. You're looking at, paper that's colored and that's been folded in weird ways to make bouquets and things. Everybody is tense and stressed because this has to go off, because if anybody, if this doesn't go right, it's a bad omen and you're doomed, or, something. And then what happens is, because everyone's so uptight and everything's trying to be so perfect, something goes wrong.
Yep.
Always. Somebody trips, somebody flubs the line, somebody spills her champagne or something like that. And then what happens? Everybody laughs. Mm-hmm. And when everybody laughs, everybody relaxes because, it's not perfect. Whew, then we can get on with it. Yep. And as pagans, we skip right to the funny part because we don't have that tenseness that it has to be perfect, because you do enough of these things, you realize, just before we go on stage for any of our big rituals and we get, maybe 100 people to show up at our Beltanes or Samhains and things, we always say, nobody knows your lines except for you. Mm-hmm. I didn't know you made a mistake until you made a face.
Yep.
And whatever happens is going to be perfect. And the last is very true, because oftentimes things you didn't think were going to be invoked become invoked. Characters that you thought were going to be a minor role suddenly take on a life of their own, and here we go off on some other tangent. But that is where the magic happens, and that's when things become even more better than your carefully honed script would have them be.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I try to do that even in regular ritual, because, you have this big public ritual and you have this script and, and there's the perfectionist part of my brain that's like, it has to go this way. And then it totally doesn't go the way it's scripted. People say the lines wrong, but it all works. It ended up all working. Yeah. And I know some of my mentors would say, that's just kind of Faith working everything out. And I know as a presenter, I have to kind of let go and let that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I wish I could do more of that with my shows. But I feel such a responsibility that, I've got 300 people maybe who have set aside this time. And, because I've been doing this for a while and I've been popular, like I have like prime times in there. Mm-hmm. And I've been to other presentations, won't get into any more detail than that, that in primetime slots, 7 o'clock somewhere, 9 o'clock, some weekend night like that were just hideous. They were just, laughably bad. And they had you back out in the hallway in 35 minutes. What the fuck was that? Kind of thing. And I don't want to have that happen. I work all year on way too many hours that people will never know about to make this, the best I can every year and come up with, 70, 80 minutes of stuff that's going to keep people's attention. As a writer, it's one of the biggest challenges you can set for yourself is, I don't dance. I don't juggle. I don't do impressions. I don't do a striptease. I don't pole dance. I just talk. And yet for the length of a feature movie, I've got to keep people's attention. Okay. No pressure. Rip sleeves and go for it. And every time I pull it off, I'm like, hey, I feel good about myself. Mm-hmm. And then I get this great movie that no one can ever see. So,
one of the things about doing this podcast that's really good, because it's, I don't script these podcasts, is that, I get people talking to me conversationally, and, a lot of funny things can happen. And I've had some very interesting interviews with people. There's one particular that was quite interesting and ended up being very funny in the end, even though it was a really difficult interview, a very difficult person to talk to because they were intoxicated.
Oh boy.
But in the end, it ended up being one of my most popular interviews. So,
ain't that the way?
Yeah. And it's always interesting to me to see just what people find interesting and funny and what people don't.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll let you in on a little insider tip if you're ever watching me perform. The first year I did it, Pagan Humor 1, I didn't have enough drink with me. So I wasn't drinking enough. And I'm speaking something, like 11,000 words going by. Often as quickly as I can because I don't edit well, and so I jam in as much stuff as possible. And last 10 minutes or so, I was losing my voice, which is, never what you want to have happen. So the next year, not only did I bring enough, liquids for me, I actually inserted into the script places where I was supposed to drink. And I get some flack about that, but hey, it's these attention to detail that might make a better show in the end. Mm-hmm. And so the obvious place to do that is when I think people are really going to be laughing, because then I have a few seconds, to take care of myself before going into the next bit. So if you're watching the show and you see me with a drink in my hand, that means I think something funny is about to happen. If I don't take the drink, that means that punchline just fell flat. So a little visual cue as to how it's going. Other times, things that I think are just a little throwaway or, finish off a paragraph or people find hilarious, and they're just rolling in the aisles. And like, didn't see that one coming. So, but if you see me with a drink and I don't take a drink, that means I need to push on to the next bit, and something I thought was going to be hilarious didn't come off that well.
Yeah.
All part of the show.
Yeah. Have you run into any flack for anything that you've done? Like, have you gotten some negative feedback along the way?
Not much, actually. People give me an amazing amount of leeway. It's almost like if you're a storyteller, you're almost blameless. Like, like you're like the Pope or something. Like you can't be, You can't be called upon. I think a lot of that is I don't get into really controversial subjects during my show because that's not really what it's about. And, really, I'd rather deal with those things away from the convention. The convention, I just want to meet new people, try new faiths, best behavior kind of thing. We'll get into the necessarily tedious things afterwards. But with the content that I do, I don't really address what's trending. And that's one of the reasons that my blog is not that popular for each individual post, is because I'm always thinking what's timeless and what's universal. And not saying that what we need to be talking about right now with various subjects isn't important, but a lot of that is stuff that's not going to really be talked about in 5 or 10 years, kind of things. Either something will happen to it. So I'm always trying to write, and then, hence with the performances, to speak about things that I think are timeless and hopefully are going to be universal. And so what happens on the blog is each post, if I'm following the numbers, which I don't as much as I should, will be at a certain level, but all the posts behind it will continue to do well. So doing things that are not topical pays off in the long run. Mm-hmm. I could do a lot more if I were talking about whatever, the blank thing is right now. Like, the moment as we're talking here today, Alan Rickman died.
Right.
Which is tragic. I loved him all the way from, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, probably the only Kevin Costner movie I enjoyed.
Right.
Because of his performance. And I could do a post on that. Cool. A lot of people will, and they'll get the numbers. They'll get the eyeballs. Mm-hmm. But that post won't be as popular a month from now or a year from now. Right. Because things have moved on. So I've consciously tried to steer away from inserting the trending hashtags kind of things, because I want to have, at the end of my life, hopefully many years from now, a timeless body of work. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm striving for, in any case. And so I don't get a whole lot of negative feedback because I'm not addressing whatever the hot button topic is at the moment. For me, I'm better suited for that in other venues.
So how does your writing inform your spirituality, and how does your spirituality inform your writing?
Well, if you're speaking of the writing as the blog posts, not that much. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of universal things that inform everything I do, and one of them is rhythm.
Right.
Which is, as a writer, something that is very rarely ever put together. But having been first a musician, I've been a drummer for 51 of my 50 years now.
Oh, wow.
Because my mother always said that I was in utero. I was a drummer because I would kick along in time to the radio.
Nice.
Which I guess makes Ringo my godfather, right? So I've always been fascinated by rhythmic things. And I've always been a drummer, kit drummer, a hand drummer, or electronic drummer, all kinds of things like that. And that mentality carried over into being a writer. And so at the stage I am at with the show now, because it was at like 16,000 words, which is way too much. I'm trying to get it down to 10. But because everything I write has a certain beat to it, and it may not be obvious, but it's always there. Trying to edit around that is very much like trying to edit a piece of music. It's hard to take one little piece out. Or even worse, if you think of something else, something that needs to be said, or a better way to do it, it's hard to add things back in and maintain the same fluidity through it.
Right.
I think it's one of the reasons why I'm so successful at monologues of the long-term format. Mm-hmm. Is people can basically like dance to this.
Right.
It's interesting in a subconscious way because it has beats to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one aspect that is carried over from one to the other. Different kinds of writing. I love writing for ritual. I had an open circle last weekend, which is one of our small monthly circles, usually hosted by different people. And it's Play Coven is kind of the other name for it. You get a lot of newbies, a lot of beginners, people who have never priested before. This is a place to do it at a very, small, intimate, but yet public setting, things like that. So I was dealing with a priestess who was very knowledgeable and very talented, but who had never done our format before. So I was along as the musical accompaniment. She had a guided meditation, she needed a drummer. Okay, I'm your guy. So I go over to her house the night before to rehearse what tempos or what she wanted, different parts. And the first thing she tells me is that, okay, well, after you do the introduction and you do the name game, we all say each other's names, and then you call the quarters, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, I thought you were the priestess and I was the musician. I didn't know I was going to be co-priesting this. And so, which is fine. It's just a communication thing. So the next morning I got up early and frantically typed out 6 pages of script of stuff that I suddenly had to have for the 2:00 performance like that. I love writing like that. Mm-hmm. Give me a deadline and I'll create. I'm, the busy little worker bee kind of thing. And having heard her guided meditation the night before, I knew what headspace she was in. So that sort of writing comes very naturally and easily for me. And I think we pulled off a pretty good write for that one. But the faith, the Wicca witchcraft kind of thing, doesn't really inform my storytelling directly. Mm-hmm. But being a witch, being part of a occult setting, that informs everything I do in my life. So you can't say there's no influence on it. But it's pretty much a different thing. When I'm writing a blog post, when I'm writing humor, I don't have the pointy black hat on. Mm-hmm. But I always have the pentacle around my neck, so there's always something.
Right.
Yes, I drink a lot while I'm talking.
That's okay.
Oh, I want to go back to something you said.
Sure.
Dealing with somebody who is intoxicated.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I don't do public tarot readings. I did a couple of weddings. I even bought the big oversized cards because I used to work at a bookstore, so you could order things like that. And you just deal with people who aren't authentically themselves, and that colors the reading in a negative way. I'm not advocating anything or standing up for anything. I mean, I was in a blues band for 15 years. I bailed my bassist out of jail to get to a gig. I put in my dues. I've got nothing against whatever substance you want to go for. Let's legalize everything and tax it all. But when you're in sacred space, in my humble opinion, I think you should be sober. I was almost said straight, but no, not straight. No. But be honest and open for the gods.
Yeah,
that's my way of doing it. So occasionally I do a lot of readings down at the store in Santa Cruz called Serpent's Kiss. And occasionally get somebody who, you had a little tailgating before you came in the store, didn't you? Well, we'll see what we can do. But the cards are going to respond to who you're presenting at the time. And if that's not fully yourself, then the reading is going to be lesser because of it.
I mean, I've been in that kind of situation before. Like, I did a party. Somebody had a Halloween party. And they're like, "Hey, you're a witch. Can you do readings?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?"
Oh boy.
And it was just like, it was kind of awkward because most of them were my coworkers. So And it was kind of weird because a few months later, there was a thing that happened and I ended up getting fired and a bunch of us got censured and I kind of predicted that was going to happen to my supervisor. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of awkward. Because my spirit sense was like, yeah, this is not going to go well. And I'm like, I can't tell him that. That's going to be bad. And then I haven't done that ever again.
Yeah. At my work, since I work at a grocery store, and there's 160 coworkers that I have, and I'm not flashy. The pentacle stays inside the shirt, but I'm not shy about it. So, if I see somebody or I see jewelry of my customers like that, I'll wish them, happy Beltane or, ask things like that. And then word gets out. So every so often, usually while we're closing up after, somebody from produce will sidle over and say, so I hear you're the guy to talk to about these things.
Right.
Oh boy. Okay. Sudden, spontaneous reverending. Okay. We put on this hat now. What do you got? And, there'll some loss that they're not able to deal with, or, one of them was just like, I think I have a ghost in my room. How do I deal with this? I was like, okay, fine. I'm always up for that. The spontaneous texts that come in from complete strangers in, some red state somewhere saying, what does it mean when this happens? Like, okay, whoever you are, okay, there goes my evening, but here we go. Yep. Let's go with that. I got no problem with that. Group setting, though,
yeah,
I won't do that anymore. It's just too personal.
Too personal, and and it takes a lot out of you. I mean, I remember feeling really wiped, and anytime I do a big group ritual, it's like, okay, gotta go take a nap now.
Yes. Oh yeah. Especially if you're part of the whole process and you spend a whole day doing this kind of thing. On the subject of things being draining, when I was unemployed for 2 years and I became like a semi-pro tarot reader. I never actually made my rent by it, but it's something. There is some income in it if you can string it together, which I'm still leery about. I read for Serpent's Kiss for 2 years before they actually convinced me late one night to actually accept some money for it. So I'm still kind of on the fence about accepting payment for reverend duties like that. But when I was unemployed, I had plenty of free time, and I got hooked into the craft and psychic fair circuit.
Interesting.
And I would spend, about every other weekend or so traveling to some, inland place and spend a day with my little round table and my little sign and my cards. And that is the ultimate draining experience because you've only got at the most 20 minutes with somebody, and you've got to find a connection with them. And people who do a lot of readings, a lot of things like that, will tell you that often what I call the penny drop moment doesn't happen until the very end, because they have this problem, but they're too embarrassed to tell you about it, the reader, even though you're a complete stranger in another town. And so they'll say something very innocuous, but the cards know what you're really trying to say. And so your reading becomes about something else until you get the penny drop moment when they say, okay, we're not talking about my job. We're talking about my lover. Got it. Okay. And you've got to somehow push that into 20 minutes, sometimes even 15 minutes, depending on what show you're doing. And then you get, if you have a sign-up sheet for these things, you can spend all day trying to put that much energy out in short little bursts like that, one right after another. And there have been times I was in a Sacramento show once when I was just too tired to drive home at the end. And I was in a convention center and I just got a hotel room in the convention center and, said, I'm done. I got nothing more. So that is one of the most tiring things I've ever done in the craft was to help out folks like that. I'd love the whole circuit, though, because I was one of the only males who was doing this.
Oh, interesting.
read in whatever you want to that, but I actually got discounts into some of the shows just because, I was a guy reading in a room full of estrogen. And there's a lot of inadvertently entertaining psychics out there because they are so obviously snake oil people and really shady characters and really bottom feeders, whatever you want to say like that. Mm-hmm. But they've got the best booths. Mm-hmm. So they got, sound going on. They got this light show going bit. Things are moving around. Everything's glittery. And it's, oh, wow. Stuff that, kind of like shoots out into the hallways, people going by. It's like, it's really impressive what some of these people are doing. I don't think they have any connections to the divine whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But they've got a really good relationship with their accountant because they're just really in the folks. So I'm more than happy, to just quietly sit at my little table with my little sign and let, I think, better people ricochet into me sort of inadvertently, and then we'll have a very nice conversation together. Mm-hmm. But I was okay with leaving that lifestyle behind when I actually got a real job.
Right. But I mean, I find it interesting because I've been to some of those fairs myself, just for curiosity's sake, really. And I find it interesting because, there are so many people that are seeking something mm-hmm. and trying to find some sort of meaning through something. Right. And, I know people tend to kind of diss new agey things. And I'm sitting there thinking, I kind of feel for the folks that are looking through that because it's like, they're seekers too. And it's they're doing something and they're trying to be good people.
Yeah, I would never diss the petitioners. But my fellow jockeys out there, some of them were just so laughably bad. Yeah. Well presented, great dressers, but no. But the people who actually come to these shows, they have nothing but my respect and empathy and sympathy and gratitude. And a new age, psychic fair is like a very easy entry point for a lot of mainstream folks. Mm-hmm. It's not that far out,
right?
To do that, it's not like it's not even go there. So it's just kind of some things people do. Okay, I'm just going to go, to this little thing, and it doesn't feel like it's you're coming out to your coworkers or something like that. But when they see me, who actually is a representative of the dark side,
right.
Then it was like, ooh, exotic. And so you just have to like bring them down to earth and try and help them out with their situation. I have nothing but respect for people who take the time and the bravery to step out and say, I have a problem that I'm just not able to solve by regular means. Help me out. I love those people, and I never mind when I get a call from the store saying, we got something in the store right now. You got some free time? And I'm like, okay. I'll be right there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Can do. There's all kinds of readings. I've had people yell at me. I've had people cry through the entire thing. I won't get into individual stories because that's sacred space kind of stuff. But if people, here's a strange thing. People will often travel to another city to get a reading. Specifically for that.
Right.
So I'd say a lot of folks come from your town, come from San Jose, over the hill, mm-hmm. And they come to get readings here because it's that intimate going on. Mm-hmm. And they're afraid someone will see them on the street or overhear our conversation in the closed room. For somebody who might know them, I don't know, but it's that important. Mm-hmm. And I take that very seriously, even though my reading style is about as kickback and informal as you might expect from any other of my presentations, because I don't want to have people, approaching on bloody knees to my throne kind of thing.
Right.
In fact, I don't even read face to face. I read side by side. I like to have people beside me at a table, and we'll look at the cards together. For one thing, it keeps all the cards right side up.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, there's less of that intimacy of, a face-to-face kind of thing. And, here's a typical guy talking side by side versus face-to-face. Women do things face-to-face, men do things side by side, like watching sporting events together kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It seems less adversarial if you have someone alongside you. Mm-hmm. So I prefer to do my readings with the person sitting next to me. Also, that way they can't see if I'm looking over at the clock on my other side to tell them, we got to wrap this up.
Right. That reminds me when I used to live in Rhode Island, and I used to go to this laundromat to do my laundry because I didn't have laundry in my apartment. And when the woman who runs the laundromat found out that I was a witch and did tarot readings, I ended up having to bring my cards all the time. And what was really interesting is that I would be sitting at the table doing the reading while the person was doing their putting laundry in the dryer or something. and it made for an interesting experience because, we're not sitting there face to face because most of the time, you couldn't do that in the laundromat. But
talk about your rhythm, though.
Right?
Yeah.
and it would be interesting because I'd come up with these things and then the people be, putting laundry in, and then I say something and then they sometimes would drop laundry, or be with the, slamming the dryer door shut or something. And it was always really funny. And it was always really interesting just how people respond to that.
You mean the person, your petitioner, or
the petitioner?
Boy there.
Well, just how people respond to tarot in general and doing readings like that. It's I find it very fascinating because they're like, oh, it's kind of like for a lot of I used to do it at where I used to work too, because I used to have a woman that would pay me to give her readings during my lunch hour. Right. And it's just really interesting how some people will be okay with tarot, but then the whole witch thing, and they're like, well, I don't know, but give me a tarot reading,
Yeah, I mean, dressed up and 21st century and electronic devices, but we are still, that the wise hut at the edge of the village. Mm-hmm. That people will go to under cloak of darkness to get the things that we need. These things have not changed. There is still a need for your village wise woman out there, that no one will acknowledge, but everybody seeks out at some point.
Right.
I like that.
Me too.
Speaking of inadvertent, punctuation with the dryer door slamming and things going on. We have our house, the Freaky Tiki, you're seeing the rumpus room back here, is separated by from the front of the house where the parlor is. And often we'll be having a board meeting back here or ritual practice or something that's going on while my wife is in the front room, usually watching baseball or tennis or some sporting event, and inadvertently commenting on the proceedings that are going on in this room. And it just is uncanny how accurate she can be sometimes of we'll reach this breakthrough moment when we're writing the ritual where everyone will contribute a sentence that just makes this thing perfect right when the Giants hit a home run and there's cheering from the other room. It's so bizarre how that works sometimes. Or we'll be discussing, something in the board meeting that we can't afford, or something that didn't go well, or some, thing we got to do that we're not really into, like paying for insurance or something like that. And then, she'll start swearing like Yosemite Sam because there was an error going on in the next room.
Those times are brilliant. I love it. Well, we're running out of time, so you're going to be at PantheaCon.
I'm always at PantheaCon, and I'm actually there a day early. We always show up on Thursday night.
We do too.
So you can check in with 10 other sensible, refined, orderly neo-pagans, and not the thousands of heathen horde that come in the next day. I'm just too old for that shit. And Thursday night, according to Jason Mankey, is Socks and Sandals night. Just so you know. So be one of the cool kids. Socks and Sandals, because we're
awesome.
we're in California now. We can do things like that.
Right.
When is my show? It is Saturday at 3:30 in the Carmel Monterey combined room. So I'm back in the afternoon slot, which I really like. People are a little more. They're awake, but not too altered yet.
Right.
And plus that way I have the dinner break after the show, so I can actually hang out for a few minutes and actually, hand out the ribbons and things like that. And then I'll still have enough brain power to go see the rest of the things on Saturday night. So I finally get to go see a whole Pandemonium show, which I'm one of my favorite bands. So I'm very pleased with where I was placed this year.
Excellent. And speaking of your writing, do you have any books that are out, or just?
Well, I keep getting people bugging me to write one, but I enjoy the short form and the nonfiction so much that I'll probably string something together and probably self-publish something at some point. I will. Hopefully, if Mark can get his act together, have something for sale finally, so I can finally join the sellouts and actually make some money off of this. Because we can't show any of the PantheaCon shows, I can't post them online or anything like that because it doesn't belong to me technically. PantheaCon doesn't even want me actually recording my own show. They're very, very whatever about that. So Mark finally convinced me, do something secular. Do a show somewhere else. So for my 50th birthday party last year, we had this huge, huge party, rented out the Masonic Temple. And I just did sort of the greatest hits of the blog, and Pecan just picked out the various bits that got the best bit. And I spoke for 45 minutes, took a 15-minute break, spoke for 45 minutes, took a 15-minute break until my voice gave out. So right now he's compiling all of that footage into a DVD, and swears up and down he'll have it ready and copied in time to be sold. So
awesome.
It should be a really good package. We'll have pictures from the blog interspersed, so you don't have to just keep staring at my face for hours on it. So hopefully that will be available for purchase at the show if all goes well. I am also technically now part of a book that was published by a real publisher.
Hey.
So there's a little bucket list item. Jason Mankey's book, The Witches of Thame, published by Llewellyn. He asked me to do a sidebar in it. So I have 1% of the word count in the book is mine.
Hey,
but I'm not asking for a percentage of the royalties on it yet. But it counts. It's right? I got to go on Amazon and look inside his book and find my little bit and actually read my writing on Amazon.com. So
that's awesome.
That's a big moment there.
That is really awesome.
So if you can buy Jason's book, and if you don't like my part of it, you can hand him a dime or something, and we'll consider that a refund.
Awesome. And we'll definitely have a link in the show notes to your blog. But if people wanted to get in touch with you to ask you questions, what's the best way to go about that?
Best way is email, so you don't interrupt me during a baseball game. And that's Angus McMahan, all one word, and that's McMC, like Ed McMahon. Angus McMahan at gmail.com is the best way for that. Also, if you have questions that you think would be fun for other people to see the answers to, I have an advice column over on the Pathos portal called Ask Angus. So you can ask me any craft-related question there and see it in print later on. And that is a whole lot of fun, too.
Awesome. Well, we'll have a link to that as well in the show notes. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, it was great waking up with you. Oh, wait, that didn't sound right.
I'd like to thank Angus for joining us on This Week in Heresy. You can subscribe to This Week in Heresy via iTunes or the Stitcher app, or follow us on Twitter at TWIH Podcast. You can also financially support this podcast through patreon.com. Thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave me a message at thisweekinheresy.com.